Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Minute Women podcast. My name is Grace.
And I'm Linnea.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm well.
You're well. We got exciting news in Nova Scotia this week via
Nova Scotia
pandemic.
we can now have bubble families.
I know. Hubba bubba.
That's super fun.
No, and actually, I was just going to compliment you to start off the episode because...
Why?
Because you have revamped our Instagram page and now it is all
shut
beautiful and aesthetically pleasing, and I feel like we have a real podcast. So given the recent news in Nova Scotia that we'll be able to go to golf courses again, we'll be able to use public tennis courts again, trails are going to be opening up soon. Beaches. Which, I mean, it's still a little cold to swim, but, like, there's nothing like a walk on the beach. I like long walks on the beach.
No.
Coffee. But
holding hands.
I thought, like, because you and I think something that you and I bonded over initially was both of our love of sport.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're both huge sports fans. And
we like athletics.
Yeah. We bonded over our love of sports movies in which masculine men demonstrate emotional vulnerability.
Yeah, that's like my favorite thing.
That's my kryptonite.
Find me a sweaty guy playing for his team and then have him be devastated by some crisis and cry. Oh, like that really gets me going.
Like men having non-toxic relationships with other men. Is
everything about the movie Rudy.
Everything about the movie Rudy.
Single thing.
Remember the Titans.
Coach Carter. Grace had never watched Coach Carter until she met me. Yeah, it is profound.
A young Channing Tatum at his best.
Oh.
But I thought, we've been doing some like heavier topics on the podcast recently. I thought we should go back to our friendship roots, and we're going to do a sports heritage minute.
Oh my gosh, which one?
We're going to do the classic Jacques Plante hockey mask heritage minute.
Oh, yes. I love it.
Absolutely.
I love
That's
every
a great
part
one.
of it.
Actually, when I was doing my research, I learned it was like the second heritage minute they ever made.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, and actually watching it, it's kind of like they try to do like innovative shots. So when he gets hit in the face with the hockey puck, the camera is the puck. So you follow the puck as it hits him in the nose.
And it's like, boom.
Yeah, and so essentially, if you don't know the story, obviously you can go watch the Heritage Minute beforehand. It's a great one, very dramatic,
it's
blood,
a good
sweat, and
one.
tears.
Lots of blood. As a
Mostly
child,
blood.
though, like as a little kid, because this was an early one,
Yeah.
so I was probably like in elementary school. I remember thinking that like he died. And then it was a different guy who came out with a mask. Like I remember being sure. And my mom was like, no, honey, like he doesn't die. He just got stitches. He's fine. But yeah, I was like so sure he was dead.
But yeah, it's like
very graphic.
Jacques Plante, he was a goaltender for the Montreal Canadiens, who is my family's team. I don't know if they're your family's team.
They actually are my family's team.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, I mean, in my household, I told the story actually in that episode, but my grandfather on my mom's side met Maurice the Rocket Richard and told him that he wasn't his favorite hockey player. He's like, you were great, but Jean Beliveau, man, he was the best.
Man, that guy could play hockey.
And the Rocket was just like, he was a beautiful skater. He was a really beautiful hockey player.
Oh, Frenchmen. They just know how to use their words.
But I was telling my parents that we were going to do this one, and my mom told me the story that, so my grandfather grew up in St. John, New Brunswick, and they lived in like the Acadian Lebanese community. So lots of the Acadian families lived in the same neighborhood as the Lebanese families. And a lot of the Lebanese families owned stores. So just like grocery stores and things like that. Yep. And the family that they ordered groceries from would always deliver their groceries last because on Saturdays, that's when the games get played on the radio. And my grandfather's family had a radio. So they would make sure to deliver there last so they could stay and listen to the game.
Oh, that's so cute. I love that.
Yeah, so
I thought you were going to say that it was like so that he didn't hear the game like at the beginning so that he could like go home and like listen to like a replay or something because he didn't want to hear like the game. My stepdad does that, like if ever, like especially during March Madness, which like was canceled this year, the NCAA men's basketball tournament. It made him very, very sad. That's like his Christmas and his birthday. Anyway, he like if he's out somewhere, if he sees it on the TV, he'll like turn in the other direction and won't pay attention to it at all. Like he's a very serious. So
take it very seriously.
That's such a cute story. I love that. And that's your mom's parents?
Yeah, my mom's dad. Yeah, so he like their family was like well off enough to have a radio, and so the delivery boys would like stay and listen to the radio.
That's so cute. I
know.
love that.
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about one of the Montreal Canadian legends, Jacques Plante, and
awesome
how he kind of innovated the game in more ways than one. He's a very innovative guy. So
all I know is that they put him in a face mask. Which, duh, you're a goalie. Goalies are some of the craziest people I've ever met. Like, I will say, like, I have some friends who are goalies. You gotta be a special type of person to, like, voluntarily want to be the person to have things thrown at their face. Whether it be a hockey puck or a soccer ball, you know, like, that's...
And I feel like being the goalie for the Montreal Canadiens especially... It is like a very elite, like it's kind of like, you know, like either like pitcher or like first baseman for the Yankees. Like, goalie for the Montreal Canadiens is like one of those positions. They've all been great for so long.
Yeah.
So Jacques Plante was born on January 17th, 1929, on a farm near Notre Dame de Mont Carmel in Quebec. He was the oldest of 11 children. The children of Pamela and Xavier Plante. And the family was quite poor, with the Great Depression hitting shortly after Jacques was born. So he's born in 1929. Great Depression hits like basically that year. Not a great time to start a family.
No.
So this forced the Plante family to leave the farm, and they moved to Shawinigan, where Xavier found a job as a machinist with the Aluminum Company of Canada. And this was the only income in the house. So there's 13 people in the house, and there's just one source of income. So it was expected of the family that everyone is going to have to pitch in, and Jacques was expected to be self-sufficient from a pretty early age. So he's the oldest. He has to be like taking care of himself. So he was also like kind of like a leader among his like siblings. So I watched a documentary, and his sister was like, he was like our leader in the family. Aww. And he took all of these attributes into his love of hockey. So he began playing hockey at the age of 3, very early age. And Jacques had always suffered from asthma. So despite his love of playing defenseman...
Same Jacques.
You, Mona Parsons, Jacques Plante, great Canadians have asthma.
Yeah. I approve this message.
So despite his love of playing defenseman from a pretty early age, he gravitated towards goalie because his lungs could keep up with the position. Yeah. And then as an adult, he kind of reflected on this and said that, you know, if it wasn't for my asthma, I never would have played in the NHL. Like that's the reason I played goalie, and it's the reason that I had success.
Yeah.
So his first goalie stick was carved by his dad from the root of a tree.
Oh, isn't that just the sweetest thing you've ever heard?
I know, and his dad also made his first goalie pads. So his first like, I don't, are they called goalie pads? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was about to call them shin pads, but I was like, no, that's not what they're called.
No, they're goalie pads.
And hockey also drove Jacques to start knitting. So his mom was too busy.
Are you sure that's not a typo in your research?
No, he's a great knitter. His mom was too busy taking care of all the other kids and ensuring that they all had clothes. And so she told him, if you want a warm hat and you want warm socks, I just don't have the time to knit these for you. So you're just going to have to learn to knit from me. And so he learned how to make toques and he learned how to make socks. And his sister actually said that he was like the fastest knitter she'd ever seen and he never dropped stitches. And
I like this guy. He's fun.
I know. And toques were his signature until he played in the NHL. So he would always wear a toque on the ice because he was really worried that, if he catches a cold, it's going to inflame his asthma and he's not going to be able to play.
Yeah.
So he's taking every
so
precaution.
Correct.
Yeah. And that's the thing.
He would
it's
not have done well during COVID.
No, poor Jacques. He would not have done well during COVID. He wouldn't have been allowed to play hockey and he might have gotten sick.
Yes.
And it's one of those things of like, it's like goalies kind of are known for being a little weird.
Yep.
So it's just like one of those things of like, yeah, and he loves to knit.
Yep. That sounds like a goalie to me.
So when Jacques was a kid, there wasn't any organized youth sport at the time. So he just played in the schoolyard. And to play inside the arena, it cost 10 cents, which Jacques never had. So, it's just, if the kids have money, they're expected to give it to the family so they can all kind of benefit from that. So what Jacques would do instead would be that he would stand by the doors of the arena and say to the boys going in that if they needed a goalie, he would play for their team. And because it's always the thing, like even in beer leagues today, there's always a shortage of goalies.
Everybody needs a goalie.
Everybody needs a goalie. Like if you play in a beer league and you're goalie, you usually drink for free regardless.
Yeah.
Same in the 1930s and 40s. But eventually this self-promotion got him playing for several teams on a regular basis. So just by picketing outside the arena, he gets to play for a couple of teams.
That's awesome.
So Jacques lives and breathes hockey. By the age of 12, he was completely obsessed with the Montreal Canadiens. So he's a French-Canadian boy. That's his team. And he would do anything to listen to their games on the radio, but his parents wouldn't allow them to listen to the games because they ran too late. So it's just like, it's going to be too loud. You can't be listening to the games.
Typical mom and dad move.
Typical mom and dad move. But on game nights, Jacques would sneak into his sister's bedroom and lie on her floor because their downstairs neighbors were also huge Canadian fans and would always play it on the radio. So he could listen to the radio from his sister's bedroom floor. And he would tell his sister at that time, he's like, I'm going to be a great Montreal Canadian someday.
Aww.
So by the age of 15, Jacques was playing goaltender for 4 different teams at 4 different levels. So he's playing on a midget, juvenile, junior, and an intermediate team.
That's crazy. He's busy.
He's a busy boy.
Goalies, man, I'll tell you.
You always need him. He also played for the Shawinigan Manufacturers team. So like the company has like a company team, but they've got this 15-year-old playing in nets for them. Jacques demanded a salary from the manufacturer team after his father told him that all the other guys on the team were getting paid. And so the coach agreed to give him 50 cents a game. And this would kind of go on to define his career a little bit. So whenever Jacques feels like he's not being respected, he's going to like make it a point and he's going to let everybody know. Yeah, so he's a cool dude. Jacques was starting to receive offers to play professionally in some smaller leagues in the U.S. There was even a team in England that was willing to pay Jacques $80 a week to play for them. So I guess there's hockey
in
leagues.
England.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Yeah. Which was, so $80 a week for like kind of like an amateur league is a lot of money at that time. But Jacques refused because he was worried about getting homesick and his parents really wanted him to get an education and they wanted him to graduate high school.
Okay.
So Jacques did manage to graduate. He graduated in 1947 at the age of 18 with honors. So he's a smart boy.
That's what year my Nana was born.
Oh, well, that's the year
Jacques.
Jacques.
She was born in 47.
It's the year Jacques graduates. He briefly worked at the Shawinigan factory after graduation, but only for few weeks because he was then offered a contract with the Quebec Citadels for $85 a week. So that's like,
ooh,
the structure of the leagues is kind of difficult to follow because like even the NHL isn't really a league yet. So I believe the Citadels is like one down from the farm teams of the NHL by today's standards.
Okay.
So he accepted and he began to demonstrate not only his talent, but his knack for innovation and his knowledge of the game of hockey. So he's a really smart goalie, and that's kind of what he gets remembered for, other than
that's so important.
The mask. Yeah.
Other than the incident.
Other than the incident. So at this time, goalies do not leave the net. So by today's standards, it's pretty common that goalies will leave the net to get the puck, pass it to their players. But at this time, goalies...
Or leave the ice completely. Well, like you can call a goalie off.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's a rule yet. I don't really know. But like for Jacques' time, the thought of leaving the net empty for even just a second is unheard of. But Jacques was a really mobile skater, and he would leave the net to essentially play like defenseman briefly. And the reason he would do this was that his team had a lot of flaws. So Jacques explained, ahead of me were 4 defensemen with assorted flaws. One couldn't skate backwards, one couldn't shoot the puck up to the blue line, and one of the other 2 could only turn one way. So somebody had to clear loose pucks. So essentially he was forced to go and do the job himself, and it worked so well that he just kept doing it. And so because of his roving, he became known as Jacques the Rover Plante.
Okay.
So again, like the sight of an empty net was really jarring for a lot of coaches, especially in the NHL. In 1948, the Citadels eventually made the championship of their league, and they were against the Montreal Canadiens junior team. So, like, I guess the Montreal Canadiens farm team, that's who they're going up against. And Jacques the Rover Plante was the player to beat. So he was essentially like the guy that people were like, if the Citadels are going to win, it's going to be because of this guy. And he led them to a victory, and it branded Jacques as a top prospect.
Wow. Against the team that he like wants to play for. His dream team.
Yeah. Like everybody you're trying to market towards, they're probably in the audience that night. So you got to imagine like all the pressure is on you as well.
I mean, I know in the NHL, like it doesn't happen that often. You don't hear about a lot of players. It happened several years ago, like Nathan McKinnon. He grew up loving the Avalanche and then was drafted to the Avalanche, so it was a big deal. But it's like interesting to just hear about other hockey players, like who their favorite hockey teams are.
Yeah.
And to see who they, like, you know, as a kid grew up wanting to play for. Like Sidney Crosby wanted to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Oh.
Yeah.
we do not like the Leafs in my house. But yeah, Leafs. I feel like it's because, I mean, at the time there's only 6 teams, so I guess the odds are a little bit in your favor. But that's also true. Like as a French Canadian, I mean, it's got to mean a lot to have a professional organization that is actually French language. Yeah. Like, I don't think there's really any other sports team in North America that their first language is French. And even today, like, I think a lot of their business is conducted in French, which is nice. And especially at that time, like, imagine if you got drafted to, like, Chicago and you didn't really speak English. Like, that's got to be so isolating. So, yeah. So he leads them to a championship, and that same year, Jacques met his future wife, Jacqueline Gagne, in Quebec City. They were engaged 2 months later.
Oh my gosh.
Jacques is a huge, like, ladies' man. That is also one thing that they do not mention in the Heritage Minute, is that He's like a huge like romantic type. And they were married in the May of 1949.
Okay.
So his life is starting to like take shape. He leaves Shawinigan to play for the Montreal Royals. So again, that's like another like junior team. His new teammate, Dickie Moore, stated that Jacques played goalie like a first baseman. He took advantage of his gloved left hand more so than most goalies in the league at that time. So it's like another innovation of the game. So like he's leaving the net, but also he's really taking advantage of the mitt that a goalie is given. And this was all in despite of the fact that he had a childhood injury that limited mobility in his left hand. So I think when he was like 5, he like fell from a ladder and broke his left hand. And it was never properly set. So he couldn't like rotate it the way that you would, that we would be able to. He was also a really big softball player. So,
really?
Like, hockey wasn't necessarily his only avenue.
What a bro. He sounds like half the guys I went to high school with.
So he plays catcher in softball, of course.
Of course he does. The only person crazy enough to be a goalie is the only person crazy enough to be a catcher.
A catcher,
Jeez.
exactly. So he played for the Shawinigan Industrial Softball League. He won Player of the Year in the summer of 1948. And he also found success in the Levy Baseball League, again, playing catcher. But hockey is his passion, and he's continuing to flourish with the Montreal Royals. But breaking into the NHL in the pre-expansion era was incredibly difficult because there's only 6 teams. And especially as a goalie, like goalies don't even carry a backup necessarily during this time. So your team is carrying one goalie, which means there's 6 spots available. And especially for Francophone players, because it was just kind of a given that the Montreal Canadiens had first go at all Francophone players. So the task of playing for the Montreal Canadiens was made extra difficult for Jacques because they already had an excellent goalie in Bill Durnan, and their junior farm team also had an excellent goalie named Jerry McNeil. So not only is there only one spot available, they even have like the next in line set up. And so it just seems like things are not aligning for Jacques during this time.
Right.
Toronto tried to leverage this situation and try to draw Jacques away from Montreal to Toronto.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's like something that it was almost like it's not like written in the rules or anything. Like obviously you can draft whatever players you want to draft or like sign whatever players you want. But it was just like you don't do that. You don't like Toronto doesn't come into Quebec and say, hey, we're going to take this player. Like that didn't happen during this time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the Canadiens manager, Frank Selke, wanted Jacques on the team, believing he wasn't just talented, but he was ambitious and he was intelligent. So Selke made the decision to move Jerry, so he's on the junior team. He's going to move him to the Cincinnati minor team in 1949 so he could learn the way that American players play, which opened up the backup role for Jacques.
Nice.
Yeah, so he's like...
Who's this Selke guy? I like him. He's making moves.
He's making moves. Money moves. But he's essentially like not getting rid of Jerry because like Cincinnati doesn't have a team you move up to. Like there's no Cincinnati hockey team. So he's just like, well, I'll put him in a market. Even today. Cincinnati does not have a hockey team. So for the Montreal Canadiens, it was essentially just like putting him in a safe space where they could poach him from later if they needed to, but they're going to put Jacques on the Montreal's like backup team.
Right.
So it allowed Jacques to have a space in the organization without getting rid of Bill Durnan as well, who had just won his 5th Vezina trophy. So like the goalie that the Vezina trophy is like MVP, like best goalie in the league. I'm sure you know that, but it's just like, you can't get rid of that guy. He's still playing at the like top of his game. So Jacques doesn't make it into the league until he's 22. But playing for the Montreal Royals, he is making $4,500 a year now. So he's like actually making a career out of hockey, which is a big deal.
Okay. That is a big deal.
So when Jacques was 22, Jacques and Jacqueline had the first of their two sons. His name was Michel. And it was the
little baby.
Yeah. And it was...
He's a dad.
He's a dad. So this was like obviously a big year for him because it's also that year that he gets his big break in the NHL. Right. So Bill Durham had retired, and so Jerry was brought back to Montreal to take his place on the Montreal Canadiens. But on the 1st of November in 1952, Jerry suffered from a fractured jaw during a game against Toronto.
Okay.
He was going to be out for 3 games, which also, like, you fracture your jaw, and they're like, yeah, 3 games.
Yeah.
It's fine. He'll be back, don't worry.
He'll be fine. 47 stitches and a fractured jaw later, you're good.
You might look like Frankenstein, but it's fine. You'll be back.
Yeah.
We don't pay you to talk. You don't need your jaw. So Coach Dick Irvin told Jacques he'd be starting against the New York Rangers. And
Jacques like, yeah.
Jacques is like super excited. Before his debut, he had to battle it out with Coach Irvin over his toques. So he's still wearing the toques that he like knits himself, and he wears that on the ice.
Oh.
Because he's scared that if he gets a cold...
I'm just imagining, though. I'm imagining him knitting toques for his little sons.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. But he 100% did. There's no way he didn't.
They had family toques. Okay, continue. Yeah. So he's fighting with the coach. He's like, man, I want to wear my toque. Like,
yeah. And
I want to wear my toque. I am French Canadian. Yeah, okay.
You sound Italian. But okay. Yeah, so he's fighting with the coach, which out the gate, the dude's like, you're finally going to have your debut in the NHL. And he's like, I won't do it unless I can wear my hat.
You got to wear my
gall.
Yeah.
But Irvin is like, you're going to look like an idiot if you wear the toque. And like, what if a player rips it from your head? What are you going to do? Are you going to like chase after your toque, you idiot? So Jacques really resists, but he enters his first game as a Canadian without his signature toque.
Toqueless.
He's going toqueless, ladies and gentlemen. But he performed impeccably during his trial run with the Canadiens. They didn't lose a single game with him in nets.
Nice.
And Selke had seen enough to offer him an official Canadiens contract in 1953.
Wow.
So the goalie position was still Jerry McNeil's for the present time. So he's being paid by the Montreal Canadiens now, but he's not going to play with them. He's going to play with the Buffalo Bisons. So he's going to go to Buffalo. He's going to play there. He's going to garner some more experience. And the press in the U.S. called him Jake the Snake.
Ooh.
Which I imagine has to be because he leaves the net. Like, instead of Rover, he's Jake the Snake now. It's also like, we're not going to call you Jacques. We're gonna call you Jake
because we're Americans. There's no Jacques here.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you're in our town now. We make the rules. Jake. So the Bisons didn't make the playoffs that spring, but Jacques' dejection was short-lived because he was brought to the bench to be Jerry's backup in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So
nice.
They were like, I think we should have 2 goalies just in case.
Just in case.
So on April 4th in 1953 in Chicago, Coach Irvin caused shockwaves when he asked the rookie Plante to play instead of Jerry McNeil. So Jerry's not hurt, but he's just like, we're going to put Jacques in nets instead.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so Jerry was on a bit of a cold streak. The Chicago Blackhawks were leading the semifinals in the series 3-2, so it's do or die. And Jacques recalled that he was like told to play when he got to the arena. Like they're like, oh, and by the way, you're playing. Like that's got to be so nerve-wracking. And he said that as he showed up, he was lacing up his skates and he was like shaking with nerves.
Oh no.
And Maurice the Rocket Richard came up to him and
Shut up.
showed him his own hands, which were shaking, and he reassured Jacques that everyone is nervous before these kinds of games. Which is
I'm gonna fucking cry.
I'm like, what a dude. What an absolute legend.
I'm gonna cry.
I don't know what we're gonna do when we do
I love it when athletic men are vulnerable. Okay?
They're just there to be friends. They know they have to work together. What are we gonna do when we do the Rocket episode? He has a heritage.
Have you watched
minute.
the movie?
Oh, absolutely, I have. They used to play it on the CBC all the time.
Yeah.
Him and his family, his wife. Anyways.
Anyway.
So Jacques led Montreal to a 4-1 victory that night, and they eventually advanced to the Stanley Cup Finals. So now, like, he's just like 2 games away from his first playoff performance. Now he's in the Stanley Cup Finals. He played in goal for the first 2 games against Boston, so he didn't do the whole series. They brought Jerry back eventually, but they won their first game. They lost the second. So to me, it sounds like he was going to stay in nets as long as he kept winning, but as soon as they lost a game, they were going to go back to the old guy. But the Canadiens won the series, and Jacques Plante's name appeared on the Stanley Cup for the first time.
Oh.
So Jacques went back to Buffalo for the next season, but for the 54-55 season, Jacques was finally made the first-string goalie for the Canadiens.
Yeah.
In his first season as a starter, Jacques performed well, and the team reached the Stanley Cup Finals again. However, that season was a bit of a tumultuous season because the Rocket got suspended. So I don't know if you remember that. I think it's part of the movie, the Rocket movie, but I
believe it is.
He gets in like a big fight, and they suspend him for the rest of the season, and the town of Montreal riots.
Loses it. Yeah. Riots.
Loses it. I don't remember his name, but there's a player who on Montreal Canadiens who became the league's top scorer in his absence. Like, the Rocket was the top scorer basically every year that he played. But this Montreal Canadian was the top scorer when he wasn't in the league. And Montreal fans booed him.
Yeah. Who was that? I know the guy's name.
I think his nickname was like Boomer or something, like the Boom. Or like Boom
I don't
Boom.
know.
But I love it. It's so Montreal. It's so Montreal to be like, it's like, boo. And he's like, I'm on your team. What do you want from me? But without the Rocket, the Canadiens lost to Detroit. So I believe, would that be the Gordie Howe years with Detroit in the 50s? I don't know. Is that too early? Yeah. So it's in the absence of the Rocket. And so essentially, I think Montreal just like writes it off. They're like, well, it's not real. It doesn't count. So in the fall, the Canadiens welcomed a new coach, Hector Toe Blake. He was a former player with the Montreal Canadiens, and Blake ushered in arguably the greatest team that has ever played. These Habs teams are remembered for dominating hockey in the 1950s, winning 5 Stanley Cups in a row, a feat that will likely never be repeated. And Jacques was a fixture on all of these teams. And so teammate
that
Dickie
just
Moore,
gave me chills. I don't know why, but like that part just gave me chills.
I know. It's just like, it's so
fixture.
funny. Like, he's a fixture on all of these teams. So his teammate Dickie Moore recalled, a lot of the times the team is remembered for kind of their offensive play, having like the Rocket, they have Beliveau, they have the Pocket Rocket, they have all these incredible players. But a lot of the times it was Jacques that was keeping them in games. So he remembers a game against Boston, and during that game, the Habs were in the Bruins were in Montreal's zone for 10 straight minutes, but Jacques didn't let them score during that entire time. So Jacques' success was a combination of talent and study. Before his time, Jacques was kind of an obsessive student of hockey. So today, it's normal to watch film. You try to read up on your teammates or your opponents. But
statistics.
At the time, it's not really a thing. Yeah.
Right.
But Jacques
there's also
studies
not really
opponents.
the resources. Yeah, like, I mean, I
Yeah,
guess
definitely.
like, you couldn't just go online and watch game footage, like.
Yeah, it's definitely harder to come by footage. It is amazing, though, like, doing the research for stuff, just how much footage there is of these teams, like, in the 1950s. I mean, not many people would be listening to games or watching games on TV. They'd be listening to them over the radio. But there's some film study of them. But Jacques, essentially, like, he learns how his opponents shoot. He studied shifts, he studied lines, and he figured out how those lines operated. And to his teammates and to his family, which now has 2 sons, he's kind of like just known as this eccentric loner.
With his toques.
With his toques, yeah. So, like, he's constantly studying film. He's a bit of a recluse. When he's not studying or playing hockey, he loved to read. He listened to classical music. He would oil paint. And he loved bird watching.
Oh, I like this guy.
I do too. And, like, you know, during all this time, to the rest of the world, he's just known as the most dominant goalie of his era. He won 5 consecutive Vezina trophies to go along with his 5 consecutive cups. So every year the Canadians won the cup, he was winning a Vezina trophy as well.
That's amazing.
Now, despite all of this success, Toe Blake, their coach, hates Jacques.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it largely boils down to the fact that Toe Blake couldn't rein him in. Like, Jacques is like, I know more about playing goalie than anyone else here, and I'm not going to listen to you if I don't think it's good information. And essentially, like, despite all of the, it's like all of the success is the thing keeping the ship together, but he's like, does not like Jacques. In spite of this, he did tell reporters later in his career, like, Jacques is the best goalie I've ever seen play. But as a man, he just does not like him. So by the late 1950s, hockey was beginning to change as a game. So in the late 1950s, you have the arrival of the slap shot, you have curved sticks, and you have way bigger hockey players. And that made goaltending even more dangerous than it was. Yeah, so, like, it's already only crazy people play goalie. Now, like, only crazy people play goalie.
Especially
so up to
with
this
no
point,
protective equipment. My God.
No protective equipment. And just to prove the point, Jacques had broken his nose 4 times, his cheeks twice, and his jaw twice, all while playing goalie in the NHL.
Well, Grace and I have previously talked about Gordie Howe, and there's a side-by-side picture you can find if you Google search Gordie Howe stitches of all the places on Gordie Howe's face that he has had stitches. It's like, it's crazy. It's his whole face if he had them all at once.
And his position doesn't require people slap-shotting a puck at your face.
Slap-shotting a puck in your face. So yeah, and yeah.
Yeah.
That was just from slips and falls and accidental puck mishaps, not anyone actually shooting it in your general direction.
And fights. Gordie got in some fights.
Gordie was a fighter.
So Bill Birchmore was the sales director of Fiberglass Canada, and he was an avid hockey fan, and he offered to make Jacques a fiberglass mask. The first mask was made in Jacques' basement. So they did the cast, made the mask all in his basement. The custom mask worked really well in practice, but Coach Toe Blake refused to let Jacques use it in the game. So he's like, I don't care, you can't use the mask, and claiming that it would restrict the goalie's vision. So, you know, like, once you have this thing on, like, how are you going to be able to see?
I hate Toe Blake. First off, what kind of name is Toe Blake?
I know.
Second, I hate him.
Which I can kind of see. Like, I was like, oh, okay, it's a vision thing. So I can understand the vision argument a little bit. But it makes no sense once you learn that Jacques played catcher his whole life. Like, he's played sports with masks, and he's like, I know I can play with a mask. I know it doesn't hurt my vision. Not to mention, he also played lacrosse. He played goalie in lacrosse, which already had masks. So he's like, I know I can do this with the mask. Why won't you just let me wear it? Which, again, I think it just boils down to being like a stick in the mud. You're like, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want, like, you to look different on the ice. So no, you can't wear the mask. So Toe refused to allow Jacques to wear the mask in the Habs game against the New York Rangers on November 1st, 1959. In the first period, Andy Bathgate, who, side note, I don't know if you know who Andy Bathgate is. Look him up after this. He's the most gorgeous person I've ever seen in my whole life. They called him Mr. Broadway, I think, because he's just stunning. He also played for New York, but like he's
taking
beautiful.
a mental note.
Yeah. Citations for this episode. Google Andy Bathgate. So Andy Bathgate came down and let go a short backhand right into Jacques' face. Red Fisher, who was the kind of like the beat journalist who followed the Canadians during this time, he thought that the shot was like deliberate, like it's meant to go into this guy's face and knock him out of the game, because they're like, that's the only way we're gonna win.
Oh no.
Regardless, the puck tore a gash in Jacques' face from the corner of his mouth. It ran through his nostril and up across the bridge of his nose. Jean Beliveau recalled Jacques' nose being relocated to his left cheek.
Oh, God.
So it's a nasty one. Red Fisher was the only person in the medical room with him, and he was just saying that, like, Jacques wasn't, like, crying or anything, but he was, like, in the mirror just, like, opening the wound. It's like, what kind of sociopath just stares in the mirror? So Jacques went to the medical room. He gets stitched up. No anesthetics, of course, because it's the 50s. So Red Fisher, who was in the room with him, recalled that he got up from the table. He left the medical room. He skated across the ice because the Canadiens' dressing room was on the other side. And he went and he put on the mask that he had brought with him. And at this point, Toe had to decide whether to let a masked Jacques go out or pull up their backup. And Jacques went out with the mask. No conversation. He's just
he did.
He's just like, did you see this face? That's why I want to wear the mask. And it's that's one of the things. It's just like, it's so easy for someone who's not in that situation to say, you know, these are all the technical reasons I don't think you should wear a mask. But it's just like,
you're gonna look funny.
Yeah, it's just like,
I don't like people who look funny.
You're not in the line of fire. Like,
so dumb.
But Jacques went out. He played the rest of the game with the mask on, and he played spectacularly for the rest of the game. And the Habs won that night. And Jacques never played.
Pain. With no painkillers.
No painkillers, with stitches, your own blood on the ice still.
Yeah.
And Jacques never played another game without the mask.
Good.
So it's just like,
way it should be.
Not up to debate anymore. I'm just going to wear it. So the 1960-61 season was a unremarkable season for the Canadiens. Their cup run ended, and the Rocket retired.
Sad. Yeah.
So it's kind of the end of an era. So Jacques had been sent down to the minor leagues because of intense knee pain. So he took like a year off from the Canadiens because he's having some issues. And then he had surgery on torn cartilage in his left knee, which was probably why he was experiencing intense pain.
Some pain, yeah.
Yeah. So the next season, despite his best defenseman, Doug Harvey, being traded, when Jacques came back to the Canadiens, he had one of his best seasons. He won his 6th Vezina Trophy and was selected to the All-Star team. In the aftermath of that season, he decides to go to Vegas because that's what you do. So he's
Like to play or just for fun?
yeah, just for fun, it seems. He went for a trip down to Vegas. I
Okay.
think it might have been part due to the All-Star team. So I think he plays the All-Star game and then he goes down to
Okay.
Vegas. Jacques not a huge gambler. Actually, his like teammates would recall that they would have like fun gambling. Like they're like, oh, we're just gonna play some blackjack. But he would never put in the full amount. He's like, I'll play, but only if I'm allowed to put in $1 when you guys put in $2.
Okay.
So not a big gambler, but he sits down at the small blackjack table for a good portion of the night. And eventually a new dealer approaches the table and he says, hey, great to see you here. Good for you to ride out your luck streak. And Jacques is really confused because he's never seen this guy before in his life. And the dealer's like, well, you are Jacques Plante, aren't you? He's just like, Jacques doesn't realize he's famous.
Oh, that's so cute.
So
He's so pure.
yeah, he's just like so surprised to be recognized so far from home.
Yeah.
And the dealer congratulated him on his Vezina trophy and on the All-Star team. And Jacques kind of like eventually concedes to the praise and he says, you know, to win the Vezina trophy, that's hard work. But to be put on the All-Star team, like that's luck. And
Yeah.
the dealer says, and the Hart Trophy, was that a combination of both? And Jacques is stunned because he didn't know he'd won the Hart Trophy.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
So he rushes to his hotel room and he calls his wife.
Oh.
And
Oh, bless him.
She is drowning in telegrams and phone calls coming to the house that are congratulating him.
Oh.
And at the time, he was only the fourth goalie to ever win the Hart Trophy. And it was kind of like,
cry again.
and for him, he's like, this is the peak of my career.
I miss sports so much.
Me too. But I love that he's just like, well, I found out I won the Hart Trophy at a blackjack table in Vegas.
Oh, that's so sweet.
So, despite all of this success, again, Toe Blake and Jacques are just, their relationship continues to deteriorate. A lot of the really
hate
great
that guy.
players from those 50s teams are gone. He's like, it's really, he's one of the few people left. And his asthma was worsening, and he ended up missing most of the front part of that 1961 season. And when he did come back, he actually managed to use the asthma to his advantage, but not really on the ice. So the story goes that the Montreal Canadiens are playing Toronto in Toronto, and Jacques didn't want to stay at the Royal York Hotel because he was like, the bedding in this hotel, it really flares up my asthma. You know, you want me to play tomorrow, don't you? So Toe reluctantly lets him stay at another hotel. And when Toe met him at the Maple Leaf Gardens the next day, Jacques had 3 women with him.
Oh, jeez.
Who he claimed were his cousins.
No, they are not your cousins, man.
And Toe said, well, the next time we're in Toronto, your cousins can meet you at the Royal York Hotel. Like all the other players.
Oh, that's
and
funny.
Toe never let him sleep in another hotel again. So it's like,
Okay.
Jacques is just going to do whatever he wants to do. Sometimes it benefits the team. Sometimes it doesn't.
Okay.
Jacques was also drawing a lot of attention to himself and not in necessarily positive ways. So Jacques was, it's not too bad. It's just that Jacques
I was
was,
going to say, this was all going so well.
he's a bit of a womanizer. I'm going to say that's the only really bad thing about him.
Okay.
So Jacques was drawing up a lot of media controversy because he was claiming that the nets in Chicago, New York, and Boston were smaller than anywhere else. So he's like, these 3 arenas have smaller nets than in Detroit, Toronto, and Montreal. And journalists were like, oh, look at this guy. He's complaining, blah, blah, blah. And even if it is true, you know, both goalies in the arenas have the same size net. Like, it's not going to impact the game. But for Jacques, who's at like the top of his game, he's like, it's giving those goalies a stats advantage because they're playing half of their season with a smaller net than I'm going to be playing with.
Yeah.
Which also I feel like, and I don't think it's selfish. It's just like, I think you're coming into like a new era of sport where you really have to be a free agent in some ways. Like it's before free agency, of course, but you have to be able to promote yourself. And it's like, it's not fair that a goalie should have an advantage over me in personal stats. Right. Not to mention, he was proven right.
Really?
Yeah, so there was a manufacturing error, and the nets in Chicago, New York, and Boston, essentially, instead of putting the top bar on top of the side poles, they put it in between the top, like the side poles. So it was like about 5, I think they said 5 inches or 5 centimeters shorter than the nets in Toronto, Montreal, and Detroit.
Well, and you'd notice if you were a goalie.
Yeah, especially like visually you would notice.
In the net.
Yeah. And so, it was just like a manufacturing error. They addressed it and then they fixed it. But all this publicity was just causing friction, even more friction between him and the head coach. And after Montreal's 3rd year in a row of being eliminated from the playoffs, Toblake decided to trade Jacques. So on June 4th, in 1962, Jacques was driving to a downtown meeting, and he turned on the radio, and he heard, "We interrupt this program to bring you a special bulletin. One of the most spectacular trades in National Hockey League history has been announced by the Montreal Canadiens. A 7-player trade with the New York Rangers. And at the center of this 7-player trade is their 10-season star, Jacques."
Wow.
So again, he learns like career-changing information just by chance. So he had been traded to the New York Rangers. Fans in Montreal were sad to see like another member of like kind of the glorious Montreal Canadiens teams leave.
Yeah.
But his wife didn't want to move the family. So Jacqueline is like, our family is really secure.
Jacqueline and Jacques.
I know. I was reading that and I was just like, that's a lot. So, they have 2 sons. They're also a francophone family. To move them to New York would not be great. No. So Jacques took on Manhattan alone. So his family doesn't move with him when he goes to play with New York.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's maybe not surprising that his time in New York was pretty short. This was also coupled with some knee issues. And, he has a desire to be with his sons, who are both in kind of like their early teens now. And he's also being offered new business opportunities. So he's being offered to be the representative for Molson Breweries. Okay. He was also offered to kind of like own stock and work alongside the manufacturers who were producing his masks. And the masks were becoming increasingly popular. So goalies across the league want to wear them, and all leagues, all levels of hockey. And Jacques was also a property owner. So he's a landlord. He owns a beauty salon. Which apparently players made fun of him for.
Of course they did.
So he retires from hockey.
Patriarchy is alive and well.
I'm sure it's not as good as Curl Up and Die in North Sydney, but, what can you do?
What can you do?
So Jacques retired from professional hockey in 1965, but his hockey career wasn't done.
Okay.
So initially he did some color commentary for the Canadiens. So he's like,
oh, that's fun.
Breaking into that world. And I also got to imagine that like he's such a good student of the game that he probably actually had really good commentary.
Yeah.
Like he probably actually provides some insight. But then he was approached by a young hockey coach at the time by the name of Scotty Bowman. And he wanted Jacques, I know, who will eventually become the most winningest coach in NHL history.
Ever. Yeah.
Yeah. But he wanted Jacques to return for 1 game. So essentially the junior Canadiens, because they needed like an amateur team, was going to play
okay.
the world and Olympic champions Soviet Union team.
Oh.
So it's kind of like the Miracle game before the Miracle game.
Yeah.
It's going to be like this young Canadian team versus the Soviets. And you know,
Yeah.
Jacques was like agreed. He was like honored to represent his country. And he received permission from Molson Breweries and the Rangers, who still owned his rights as a player.
Right.
And he began practicing. And the Canadians ended up beating the Soviets 2-1. And Jacques was named the first star of the game. So,
Ooh.
you know, he's still thriving in retirement. So at the beginning of the 1967-68 NHL season, Jacques received a call from his ex-teammate who was seeking some help with coaching the expansion Oakland Seals. So
Right.
this is the like expansion teams.
This is the expansion era of the NHL.
Yeah. It's crazy for how long there was only 6 teams.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you have to wait until the 60s.
And a lot of stuff happened when they decided they were going to expand. There were a lot of weird teams that didn't last very long and sub leagues, and it really did take a while to figure out how more hockey teams were going to kind of enter the NHL because people don't like change. And
it's also like proportionately a huge expansion. Like,
yeah.
So if you talk about like NFL expansions, for example, you're only ever adding like such a fraction of the league that already exists. But with the NHL expansion, I think you doubled the size of the league in one expansion.
I think the immediate expansion was when it was finally like said and done. It was it was 6 more teams.
Yeah. And so the team that he's going to go help coach, the Oakland Seals, is not a team that survives.
No.
But Jacques...
The Oakland Seals, are we surprised they didn't last? Go ahead.
Who even wants them?
No one.
Jacques found coaching kind of frustrating because he was just kind of like... I think it's a thing that a lot of really good professional players find as difficult as coaching is like not every player is committed as I was.
No.
Like some people are coasting on their talent or like they just don't want to commit the time that I was willing to commit during my professional career.
Yeah.
So he does like the 3-week training camp with them, but then he just goes home. He's just like, this isn't for me. Though it was also a time of player coaches. So you could have a coach who would also be a player.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. And so he played a few exhibition games for the Seals, but like he was never like a player for them.
Right. Okay.
But him showing up in these exhibition games was enough to create rumors that Jacques is like planning a comeback. And in June of 1968, Jacques was selected in an intra-league draft by the St. Louis Blues, who were coached by Scotty Bowman.
Of course.
So he signs a $35,000 a year contract for the 1968-69 season.
Yeah.
And his first season with the Blues, Jacques split goaltending duties with Glenn Hall, another incredible goalie. And together, they won the Vezina Trophy. So
I was going to say, I feel like that would have been someone, like, I feel like Hall would have been someone who Jacques would have been able to see some of himself in.
Yeah.
Because Hall was such a dedicated, like, student of goaltending.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also with a coach like Scotty Bowman, like, you're only going to come back to the game if the circumstances are perfect. And they seem like they were.
And they won the Vezina together.
They co-won it. And this was Jacques' 7th Vezina Trophy, which made him the goalie with the most Vezina trophies ever at the time.
Who has anyone surpassed?
I don't think so. The only goalie I could think of is Patrick Roy, but maybe Martin Brodeur, but I don't think either of them won 7.
I don't think Brodeur's won 7. That sounds...
No, I feel like he won like 3 or 4, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So while playing for the Blues in the 69-70 playoffs against the Boston Bruins, a shot was fired by Fred Stanfield and redirected by Phil Esposito to hit Jacques in the forehead. And it knocked him out and broke his mask. But when he recovered in the hospital, he was like, if it wasn't for my mask, I would have been dead.
Yeah, you're not wrong there, bud.
The first thing, the first thing he says when he wakes up is he's like, wow, this mask saved my life, which you got to imagine Fiberglass Canada wished they had the cameras rolling and was like,
yeah,
this is the
They're
best
like, you said
advertisement
what?
ever.
Yeah.
Say it again. Someone knock him out. Get him to regain consciousness again. So that game proved to be his last game as a St. Louis Blues. He was traded in the summer of 1970 to the Toronto Maple Leafs. He led the NHL in lowest goals against average, which is like the standard stat for measuring a goalie.
For goalies, yeah.
During his first season with the Maple Leafs. So at the end of the season, he was named to the NHL's second All-Star team, which was the 7th time he was honored as an All-Star. He continued to play for the Leafs until he was traded to the Boston Bruins in the late 1972 season, recording a shutout against the Blackhawks in his debut as a Bruin. So he kind of closed out the 62 season with the Bruins. He played 8 regular season games and then 2 playoff games, which would be his last games in the NHL.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean he's retired from hockey. Because
it does not.
It's kind of before the merger with the World Hockey Association. So right. Jacques accepted a $1 million 10-year contract to become a coach and general manager of the Quebec Nordiques in the World Hockey Association in 1973. He was highly dissatisfied with his team's performance.
Of course.
And he resigned at the end of the year.
It was the Nordiques. So
So his professional life is kind of unraveling, and so is his personal life. So he was having a fallout with Fibersport, so the company that was producing his masks. I don't know exactly. It was, to be honest, it's just kind of boring. I think it was just like disagreements over a sales and who was getting cuts. But essentially, like, they go to court, huge falling out with the company. His marriage of 23 years ended as well in 1972.
Well,
He was bringing 3 ladies to the Maple Leaf Gardens. It was also probably due to the fact that he had met Raymonde Udesard, who was a young Swedish woman who had moved to Montreal to work at Man and His World, which was an offshoot of the Expo 67 exhibitions. So, Montreal's trying to like keep the ball rolling with Expo 67. They have this new exhibition, and Raymonde works there. And she met Jacques, and gradually she became more involved in his life. They wound up living together. She moved with Jacques to Edmonton when he decided he was going to come out of retirement again. He's kind of a Brett Favre. He just like goes in and out of retirement all the time. So he played 31 games with the Edmonton Oilers, but he wound up retiring from the Oilers training camp in the 75-76 season because he received news that his youngest son had died. I could not find anything about why his son had passed away. He would have been in his like early 20s, so I feel like it's probably for like either died of suicide or like drug overdose, because those are the only reasons you don't say someone dies. But I don't want to spread rumors or like say that that's why it happened.
But that sounds plausible.
Yeah, because I mean, like, if it was a car accident, you would say he died in a car accident. Like, yeah. Anyways, very sad, and it results in the end of his professional career for good. So once his son passes away, he like hangs up his skates forever. After retiring, Jacques and Ramon married, and they moved to Sierre, Switzerland. He adapted very well to the Nordic lifestyle, apparently. He loved, like, going to coffee shops and, like, just living as a Swiss person.
With his toques.
With his toque. Yeah, he's finally allowed to wear it again. And he especially loved living in Sierre because he said, like, for the first time, he wasn't, like, suffering from asthma. Like, there was, like, clean air for the first time. And he was just like, oh, man, I'm not having asthma attacks all the time. He did return to Canada regularly, though, because he worked as a hockey consultant well into his retirement. So essentially, they'd be like, hey, our goalie really needs some help with something. And he would go and, like, coach them. He also still did some broadcasting for the Canadiens, and he was always coming back because they were giving him honors. So the Montreal Canadiens honored him and the rest of the 1950s teams. He was also inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1978. In January 1986, Jacques resumed his work as a hockey consultant. He was working with the St. Louis Blues when a colleague mentioned to Jacques that he thought it was strange that he hadn't eaten anything at lunch. And Jacques mentioned it to the team doctor, who examined him and found that Jacques had lost 7 kilograms in a week, which is a lot. So Jacques rushes back to Switzerland, and he was diagnosed with terminal stomach cancer. So at the age of 57, he goes under for surgery on his stomach, but he doesn't survive the surgery, and he passed away on the 27th of February, 1986 in Geneva.
At 57.
He was only 57, yeah. So his funeral was held in Switzerland, and it was attended by former teammates like Jean-Claude Tremblay and Jean Beliveau. There were also many services held in Montreal to honor him.
That's so awful.
I know. It's just like, and I was watching a documentary with like players, and they were like, I saw him 2 weeks before. I saw him like a month before. He seemed perfectly healthy, especially because the Canadiens kind of like honored the team the year before he died, like as in a celebration of like 30-year anniversary.
It is a real blessing he got to attend those. Get honored with those awards and those, like it is really nice.
Yeah. And like, so like teammates were like, we saw him and he seemed perfectly healthy. And, and they were saying like, the reason that we come back for these memorials, it's not because we want like the honor, it's because like we get to have locker room camaraderie again. Like that's what you miss when you leave the sport. And it's like, it wouldn't have been the same without Jacques there. It wouldn't have been the same without these people here. So he was like very much loved by teammates, I think. So after his death, he continued to receive recognitions for his talent and innovation to the game of hockey. In 1972, Jacques had written a book called On Goaltending, Elements of Hockey Net Minding by the Master of the Game. In French, it's called Devant la Filet. So it's essentially like the textbook on goaltending. And it just demonstrated how progressive and professional Jacques was, and his style and approach to the game was so different than a lot of players at that time. Jacques was inducted into the Quebec Pantheon of Sports Heroes and the Montreal Canadiens Hockey Club, having his number retired. So he always wore the number 1, and it was retired.
Yeah.
The Swiss National Hockey League announced the creation of the Jacques Plante Trophy, which is their equivalent to the Vezina Trophy. So in the Swiss Hockey League,
wow.
If you're the number 1 goalie, you are the Jacques Plante winner. Yeah, because he was also a hockey consultant in Switzerland. Like once he moved there, he like integrated himself into the hockey community, and he tried to like help players there. In 2000, Canada Post dedicated a series of stamps to the greatest Canadian hockey players of the 20th century. Because if you are a great Canadian, you will be on a stamp.
You will be on a stamp.
Only 5 hockey players were commemorated in this run, and they were the Rocket, Doug Harvey, Gordie Howe, Bobby Hull, and Jacques Plante.
Yeah, my grandfather had those stamps. Those are in his stamp collection. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the life and times of Jacques Plante. I mean, I was expecting like, oh yeah, he's the dude who made the mask. But he did so much for the sport of hockey. Like just
I like him.
I like him too. Like just the thought of watching a game of hockey where a goalie doesn't leave the net. Like that's such a typical part of the game now to have
he was an innovator. He was a real innovator, and he doesn't seem to. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious he doesn't really care what other people think. Like he's going to be a freaking goalie, and he's going to do it well.
Yeah. And it just takes so much like courage to be like, no, I know more about this than you. Like, I know you're the coach, but I'm a specialist and I know how to play goalie. And I like that it never seemed to be to the detriment of his team. Like, I think sometimes when you have players like that, it winds up impacting the whole chemistry and dynamic of the team where it's like, oh, wow, this person's being like a real pain in the butt. Like, I wish he would just be a team player. But I think goalie is such like an insular role on a team that he still had like the admiration and respect of all his team members. Bit of a womanizer, but you know.
That was a great one.
Yeah, I thought,
I loved that.
We've been doing some heavy political ones lately, so thought we should bring some sports back into people's lives.
Thank you. It made me very emotional.
Oh. I honestly don't know what we're going to do when we do the Rocket episode because that one's just like
I'm just going to cry a lot.
All right.
So thanks everyone for listening to this week's episode of the podcast. If you haven't already, please go give us a follow on our social media channels. On Instagram, we are at Minute Women Podcast. On Twitter, we are at The Minute Women. And on Facebook, we are also Minute Women Podcast, just like on Instagram. So please go give us a follow. We post lots of content every day pretty much. So thanks.
Yeah, and if you would want to like download, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast, that is a huge support to us. So on whatever platform you listen to us on, that's always great. And also we have a website, so you can visit us at our website, minutewomenpodcast.ca. You can download episodes there, check out the sources to every episode, and also there's links to our social media channels.
Bye!